Sitting on the shores opposite Newport, Rhode Island, is a little-known Gilded Age summer cottage, and while its location might keep it secluded, it was certainly built to rival the palaces of Newport. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit the subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1841, Nelson Aldrich began life far from the world of mansions and millionaires. He was born in rural Foster, Rhode Island, to a family of modest means. As a young man, he worked as a grocery clerk in Providence and eventually became a partner in the business. Ambition and shrewdness propelled him into politics. He rose from the Providence City Council to the Rhode Island State Legislature, and by 1881 he entered the U.S. Senate, where he would serve for 3 decades. Meanwhile, Aldrich was not content with just a public servant's salary. He invested wisely and cultivated close ties with the heirs captains of industries. Through banking, electric companies, gas utilities, rubber manufacturing, and the booming sugar trade, he quietly built a substantial fortune. Gilded Age business titans rewarded Aldrich's friendship with stock shares, loans, and lucrative business opportunities, allowing this once poor grocery clerk to achieve great personal wealth. Aldrich's influence in Washington grew to legendary proportions. He became the dominant power broker among the Senate of his time, so much so that contemporaries nicknamed him the general manager of the nation for effectively steering national economic policy. He championed protective tariffs and the gold standard, aligning federal laws with big business interests. Though critics accused him of catering to Wall Street's great robber barons, even President Theodore Roosevelt acknowledged Aldrich's sway, once calling him the kingpin of the Senate's game. This political clout, combined with his wife's family ties to wealth, cemented his status among the rich and powerful. By the early 1900s, he was one of the most influential figures in America, and he decided to pour his success into creating an estate that would reflect his prestige. Aldrich's immense wealth allowed him to maintain multiple grand residences. In Providence, he owned a stately federal-style mansion on Benevolent Street, a historic house that is now preserved as a museum. But his most extravagant home was Indian Oaks, the Warwick Neck estate that he began developing in the 1890s. Aldrich envisioned Indian Oaks as a showplace befitting his stature, and the project became a 16-year endeavor of architectural ambition. Construction on the main house began in 1896 under the direction of Carrere and Hastings, a prominent New York architectural firm. They, along with local architects Stone, Carpenter, and Wilson, designed a French Renaissance-style chateau clad in gray stone. Nearly 200 craftsmen, including artisans brought from Europe, labored on the mansion's lavish details. When it was finally completed around 1912, the result was a 70-room palace filled with ornate artwork, intricate wood carvings, and inlaid marble at every turn. The estate's grounds and outbuildings were equally impressive. Indian Oaks originally spread across 225 scenic acres on the bay, dotted with towering oak trees that likely inspired its name. Aldrich outfitted the property with all the amenities a Gilded Age mogul could want. There was a 150-foot water tower that not only provided utilities, but also concealed a private railway and supply tunnel leading from the tower to the main house, an ingenious way to transport goods up from the shore without disturbing the manicured landscape. A stately carriage house sheltered the family's horses and carriages, and later automobiles, and a charming caretaker's cottage set near the gate to house the groundskeeper and likely screen visitors as they arrived on the estate. By the water, Aldrich built a substantial boathouse so he could enjoy yachting on Narragansett Bay. Every element of the estate was carefully planned for luxury and convenience. For instance, 2 carved marble sphinxes were placed as guardians on the terrace overlooking the bay, a hint of old-world elegance watching over the Rhode Island coastline. And in a rather personal touch, waist-high iron railings were installed across the French doors of the upper floor. These were put in place because Mrs. Abby Aldrich was reportedly known to sleepwalk, and the family took precautions to ensure her nighttime wanderings remained safe inside the house and out. Indian Oaks quickly became a site of high society gatherings and family celebrations. The most famous was the wedding of Abby Aldrich to John D. Rockefeller Jr. in 1901, a union of 2 of America's most prominent families celebrated in the mansion's richly decorated halls. At the time, Rockefeller was one of the wealthiest young men in the country, and the Aldriches spared no expense in hosting the memorable ceremony. The estate's splendor provided a fitting backdrop to what was dubbed the wedding of the century in Rhode Island. This event symbolized the peak of the estate's glory. Indian Oaks was not just a private retreat for the Aldrich family, but also a stage where historical alliances were forged and the elite rubbed elbows under crystal chandeliers. By the time the mansion was fully completed in 1912, Senator Aldrich had realized his dream of creating a familial Gilded Age sanctuary, a place where business tycoons, politicians, and even future governors and vice presidents might gather for secluded summer parties across the bay from Newport itself. As the estate reached completion, Nelson's own story was entering its final chapter. After nearly 30 years in the Senate, Aldrich decided not to seek re-election in 1911, partly as the rising progressive movement began challenging the old guard conservatives like himself. He retired from Congress, but not before chairing the National Monetary Commission, helping to draft the plans that laid the groundwork for the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. In his later years, he finally had more time to enjoy the estate he had so painstakingly built. He passed away just a few years later in 1915 at the age of 73. For his family, however, the Indian Oaks Mansion proved both a splendid legacy and a sizable responsibility. Maintaining such a vast property without the patriarch's resources was challenging. Over the next 2 decades, the Aldrich heirs continued to use the estate, but the world was changing. The opulence of the Gilded Age was giving way to the austerity of the Great Depression, and a private estate of this scale was increasingly difficult to keep up. Eventually, the family made a momentous decision: Indian Oaks would leave the Aldrich family's hands. In 1939, Nelson's heirs sold the Indian Oaks estate to the Roman Catholic Diocese of Providence for the token sum of roughly $75,000, the modern equivalent of about $1.7 million. The sale included the mansion itself and about 100 acres of land. Thus, after nearly 40 years as a Gilded Age family seat, Indian Oaks began a new life with a very different purpose. Renamed Our Lady of Providence after the seminary that would occupy it, the grand mansion and its grounds were adapted to serve the Catholic Church. By the early 1980s, however, the seminary program was consolidated elsewhere, and in 1983, the diocese ceased full-time seminary operations at the mansion. From the early 1980s up until 2015, Indian Oaks was adapted for the use of various schools, but still owned by the diocese itself. Today, the Aldrich Mansion is one of Rhode Island's prized historic venues. The Diocese of Providence continues to own and maintain the property, and instead of senators and seminarians, its rooms are filled with wedding guests, conference attendees, and tourists eager to soak in the Gilded Age atmosphere. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about the Aldrich Mansion? Did anything stick out to you? Let me know down below in the comments section, and while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.